Intel, who have come up with a fantastic device there on the right. When you see it with just standard ECG electrodes stuck to it, it's less impressive. The point is the device is wonderful, but the sensors are still the same thing that we did 100 years ago. So here's a quote from McAdams, not quite Murphy's Law, but it makes sense to start with the sensors. My view is that you actually start with what do you try to monitor, where is it best to monitor it, and come up with a new way of monitoring it. So, for example, blood pressure. One of these cuffs around your wrist. For continuous monitoring, no way. But what about if you're using pulse wave velocity instead? You're thinking outside the box, you're coming up with something different. So my view is that we have to actually start to be revolutionary in the way that we treat our sensors rather than leave them to the end of the project and just use standard electrodes. My company is working on a patch, and I don't have a pointer. Yes, I do. So the patch is reusable, the device is reusable, sorry, and the sensor patch is then disposable. What we're trying to do is to try and get all the vital signs that are normally measured and try and change the way you measure them so that you can measure them under one small disposable patch. So if you have to measure SpO2 from your fingertip and you have to have a wire from there to your patch, it's not going to work, really, honest. But if you can try and measure SpO2 from the chest, then you've started to change things. You can put it into a patch, for example. So at the moment we measure respiration, temperature, accelerometer, and ECG from a small patch. We're working on SpO2. It looks very promising, a biometric. And we're also working on pulse wave velocity. Again, that may not be in a patch on the chest, it could be a patch somewhere else. But the point is we do need to get out of the box, the mental box, where we have to measure things from the same places that we've always measured them, using the same sensors that we've always used. That's our roadmap. That's what we want to do, is to have a elastoplast, we say in English, a bandage, very small dressing, and just throw the whole thing away eventually. Device interoperability is the other problem, and it's going to be dealt with in more depth by one of the speakers that I invited from Continua Alliance. But we as a small company, we joined Continua Alliance quite recently, and it helps us get our product into the market. It also means that we as a small fish are actually now dealing with some of the very big companies. So from a small company point of view, that is a very good decision from our point of view. The other barrier that I mentioned was we need connected healthcare systems. We can't change, I can't change the way medicine is carried out in a local hospital because it's disruptive technology. So we need to get involved with heavyweights. In Northern Ireland, we're very fortunate in that the European Centre for Connected Health has just been created. That's fantastic. We have 3 ministers who are imposing connected health, and they're banging people's heads together to get it done. So for companies based in Northern Ireland, but for all of you, it's actually a very exciting time where you can get your devices into the markets. So that happened very recently. The other model that impresses us in our company is CIMMIT in America, which is different but somewhat similar. It's big enough to actually impose, get things tested in the hospitals that are all part of it, and get things done. So that has been very impressive, and it has impressed the UK government so much that the UK government are now trying to create CIMMIT-type organisations in the UK. So they have one in Manchester, and it's called MIMIT. And so we joke that we'll create one in Northern Ireland, and we'll call that NIMIT, and you can go on down the alphabet if you wish. So routes to market for a small company, that is the big problem. We have what everybody says is very good technology. That's very nice, but it doesn't pay the wages. And how do we actually get it into the market and make money? Our first approach was to get involved with big companies because they're big enough, they can do all the marketing, and we'll just be the flea in the dog's back. They'll do all the work, we have the technology, and that'll be wonderful. And it's a very good idea. We 3 academics came up with that. We were very proud of it, but it doesn't necessarily work. We devised a system with Welsh Allen several years ago. The problem with very big companies is when they have a problem somewhere else, and Welsh Allen had a problem with the FDA, with some other device, then they just put everything else on the shelf. So what is your lifeline? What is the most important thing to you in your life? To them is a minor project, and they put it on hold for several years. They have just resurrected it about after 5 years or 6 years. So if we were depending on them for survival, well, we would have been bankrupt by now. So that was one of our brilliant ideas, but wasn't necessarily the best one. We have still links with large companies, so it's not always a bad story, but larger companies do work to their timescales, and it can be quite slow. But with joining in with Continua, and we have recently links with CIMMIT and doing some work with the NatSims laboratory, so it still is a positive story. But it's not just as wonderful as we initially assumed. EC projects, we would like to thank the European officers, because the money does help. It keeps your company alive, and it also means that you start to work with other people who are key specialists in cardiology, etc., around the world, and it gets your product known. So it is a very important way for small companies to survive and also develop and get into niche markets. So thank you very much. And last, but definitely not least, local hospitals. Initially, in our naivety, I confess, we thought local hospitals are not that important. We want to go for the big players. Whatever they want, if they want lights on it, they want flashing lights, they want whatever it is they want, we'll do, and we'll work for them. As I said, that doesn't happen very fast. And here's another quote for you. Companies are more interested in products, not PowerPoint. Everybody can show nice, glossy slides. What they want to see is the product on a patient. And that is where we, in my company, did something quite wrong. We've changed it now, but if you're starting a company, actually work with small hospitals, local hospitals. It's not impressive. It's not going to make you your millions. It's not going to pay the wages. But when you have a company come in, you can take them down to the local hospital and you can actually show them there is a product which works. Companies want to see it working. They don't want to see nice, glitzy PowerPoint presentations. The other thing is that the local hospitals will very quickly say to you, Aunt Aggie can't use your device, it's useless, because, and they'll tell you something that you hadn't considered in your very sophisticated academic brain, you hadn't thought of it. Murphy laws always keep applying. So do work with local hospitals. It's not going to make you lots of money, but it will actually help you devise something which actually works and will one day make you money. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.